Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast, Season 5, Episode 36, your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. What does Steve Ballmer paying Kawhi Leonard under the table for a no-show contract to promote some environmental bank have to do with the panoply of streaming services that now have NFL, NBA, different sporting event broadcasting rights? And what do either of those things have to do with the fact that Streameast, the largest pirated sports broadcasting network in the world, was recently raided and had their servers confiscated and their website shut down? Fear not. I will correlate all three of these things in what is a long 20-minute segment. Thank you to all of my veteran listeners, the ones that have been around for years. And if you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1, Rules Are for Fools.
A number of sports stories came out over the course of the last week, and although on their face they don't look like they actually correlate at all, they harken me back to the premise of why I started this very podcast. Why did I actually get onto this microphone and start running my mouth 5 years ago? And that inaugural episode of challenging my own fandom, my faith in these sports franchises, in these teams, in these schools. This week I saw a story about how Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, basically cheated his partners, the other owners in the National Basketball Association, by paying under the table Kawhi Leonard via a no-show or a no-work contract through an environmental bank, which I just have to take an aside and say this, is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. An environmental bank. And when I get into the story, it's sillier than it sounds coming out of my mouth. Then the second story was the fragmenting of all of the broadcast rights for these different leagues. You're now seeing different streaming services have 2 or 3 NFL games, 10, 20 NBA games. The Premier League will have scattered broadcasting rights. These leagues, instead of having a one-stop shop for their product, are now, strictly because of the money, spreading these broadcast rights thin via different streaming services, different broadcasting mediums, challenging fans to spend more and more money in more and more places to see one collective sport, to watch the National Football League, all of its games, all of its partners, to watch the National Basketball Association, all of its game, all of its teams, all of its partners. And that led me to the final story that I saw, the streaming service Streameast, a pirate or a bootleg platform that allows you to stream sports events for free no matter what the game, no matter what the league. The FBI had a major sting in conjunction with the authority services from different countries, namely Egypt, touted as the world's most popular sports website because every sporting event on the site was free. The world's largest sports website was shut down, and the language that was used by many of the principals who were involved in shutting it down, that led me to create this very segment. Let's begin with Steve Ballmer, with Kawhi Leonard, with the Los Angeles Clippers. Steve Ballmer is one of the world's largest investors. He's one of the world's richest men. I believe he's either in the top 5 or the top 10 richest men on planet Earth. So he has a lot of capital and he has a lot of room to invest. And he is well known as a pretty astute or savvy investor. Steve Ballmer invests in this environmental bank. And you say, Patrick, stop saying that. It's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. It gets much worse, dear listener. It gets much worse. These Silicon Valley cunts use these types of terms all the time. This environmental bank claims that it has a litany of clients that are doing what? They're looking to reduce their carbon footprint on planet Earth, given whatever they do. So if you're in construction, if you're in sports, if you're in entertainment, it doesn't matter. You can bank with this quote-unquote environmental bank, and you can reduce your carbon footprint. How do you do this? Well, for every dollar that's invested, they go out and they plant a bunch of trees somewhere. So the argument being, hey, if you're taking from the environment trees, land, energy, we can contribute back to the environment by way of all these trees that we're planting, and therefore your net carbon footprint will be zero. Now, whether or not that math actually works, whether or not you buy into that argument, which many people do not, this theory that you can create a net carbon zero for anything that you do or your companies do or anything that you support does by simply planting trees, that's an argument for another segment. That's the premise of the bank, and a lot of people bought into it. This bank raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and Steve Ballmer was one of the principal investors in this bank, and I believe he gave them at least $50 million, if not more. The Intuit Arena, the arena that Ballmer built for the Los Angeles Clippers with his own money, didn't ask the city of Los Angeles, didn't ask the state of California. He built it with his own money. This arena was partners with this environmental bank so that they could claim the arena in its construction and all the resources that it took to build it. It had a net carbon footprint. This arena had a net carbon footprint of zero. About a year ago, the FBI files this indictment. It turns out that the entire enterprise was a fucking scam. All of the clients that this bank claimed to have were bullshit. They were all made up. With very little investigative work, many independent sources, not the authorities, these are independent journalists, have verified that there weren't any trees ever planted. There was no quality control as to whether or not any trees were planted on behalf of any of the clients that actually were legitimate so that they would have a net carbon footprint of zero. Here's where the fun starts. You've got this guy Ballmer who's intimately tied with this company, and he gives them $50 million. And it turns out that his star player that he was able to sign, and a lot of people raised an eyebrow as to whether or not Kawhi Leonard, one of the most sought-after free agents in the National Basketball Association in the last 10 years, would sign with the Clippers. In fact, does sign with the Clippers, and for a team-friendly deal. He didn't get all the money that he could have gotten. He certainly had offers that were rumored to be in the marketplace that were for more money. Pablo Torre, a sports investigative journalist, and by the way, I say that with the utmost respect. Adam Schefter, asshole, not a sports journalist. What is the name of the guy in the NBA? The heavyset guy's name begins with a W, Woosh something. Asshole, not an investigative journalist. These guys are mouthpieces for the league. They're mouthpieces for the teams. They go out and they announce trades before anybody else knows about them. They are the ones that actually publish rumors that need to be spread, whether it's a player side, an agent side, a team side. But there are things going on in the background in these sports leagues, and there are a few investigative journalists out there that will uncover them, and they have no real tie to the league because the league is routinely embarrassed by the things that they'll find out. Pablo Torre is one of them. You can go and look up his podcast. It's on all podcast networks. This company that was indicted by the FBI files bankruptcy, and one of their largest creditors is this KL2 LLC that's owed $7 million. And Torre does some investigative work on who this entity is. It turns out it's an entity that was started by Kawhi Leonard, and it turns out that Kawhi Leonard had a contract with this environmental bank to do marketing and celebrity endorsement. And he did zero marketing and zero celebrity endorsement for the money he was paid. How much money, you say? I mean, maybe it was a nominal amount, and he was pissed off that he didn't get the kind of dollars that he was garnering from some of the other products that he was marketing for, that he was promoting, that he was a celebrity influencer for. He was paid $28 million. $28 million for what has now been discovered is a fucking no-show job. He didn't do anything for the money. And it's now clear that Ballmer and Leonard used this environmental bank that was nothing more than a sham as a pass-through entity so that they could circumvent the NBA rules with regard to the salary cap and how money can be paid to players from a team. Any kind of money for any type of benefit to a player. If a team goes out and gets the player the penthouse suite in every single hotel that the team stays in on the road, that is technically a benefit that must be counted towards the player's salary, which is then counted towards the salary cap. What both Ballmer, the Los Angeles Clippers, and Kawhi Leonard conspired to do was pay Leonard money under the table so that the Clippers could keep way under the salary cap in order to be more competitive, pay more and better players to come to that basketball team, while still providing Kawhi Leonard this benefit, this money, which made him a much higher paid NBA player than people realized. My initial reaction to this story was, who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck? Steve Ballmer and Kawhi Leonard conspire to do what? To screw the other teams in the NBA, to screw the commissioner, to undermine the competitive balance in the league. So what? It's not like they're screwing the consumers of the league. You can be NBA diehard and throw a hissy fit about how this type of action does alter the competitive balance, but in the long run, does it really hurt the NBA fan? What Ballmer did was really screw over his partners, which are the other NBA owners and the league. But then it dawned on me, this crisis of conscience that I've been having being a sports fan over the course of the last 5 years. This is how NBA owners do business. Business just with their sports teams? No. This is how they do business. This is how NFL owners do business. Oh, you mean how they do business with their sports teams? No. This is how they do business. And you can say the same for Major League Baseball. You can say the same for National Hockey League, the English Premier League. This is how these wealthy billionaire owners do business. If they feel like they have to break the rules because the rules are not favoring their team, they don't have any type of advantage, they're going to look for an advantage. They're going to look to bend the rules because, frankly, the rules really apply to everyone but them. I know many of you have worked for powerful people. I know many of you have worked alongside powerful people. And they often look at these regulations, at these rules, at these bureaucracies that enforce them with disdain because they feel like they are altruistic people. They are working hard for the betterment of others, and they feel like all of these rules and regulations and these bureaucracies that are enforcing them are just holding back people that want to do good, holding back people that are working towards progress. This is the mentality. And there may be some acknowledgement that the rules, the regulations, the bureaucracies, they're necessary, but they're not necessary in this case. They're not necessary when it comes to this person, this enterprise, this endeavor. And you see someone rationalize why it's justifiable to break these rules. I don't give a shit about Steve Ballmer using a scam enterprise as a pass-through to pay Kawhi Leonard under the table, thereby violating the NBA salary cap rules. I stand up and take notice, though. I do care when the types of people who could justify an action such as using a scam enterprise as a pass-through so that you could circumvent rules and cheat your business partners turn around and tell me that it's to my benefit that there is going to be this diversity in broadcasting rights across different platforms for different sports, and that there'll be a more egalitarian ability for people to see these sporting events. If you have Amazon, you'll be able to watch some games. If you have Netflix, you're going to be able to watch some games. If you have Paramount, you're going to be able to watch some games. But the reality is that these owners and these leagues don't give a shit about anything but the money, and that they're going to take as much money as they can from as many suitors as they can, and if that dilutes the product across 4 or 5 different streaming platforms, they're going to do it. And if it allows them to charge you more money to try to consolidate all of those teams that are all part of one league, if that's going to cost you more money, so be it. It is certainly not an egalitarian model. And in fact, I believe that it is well understood that it's not egalitarian, that even if you have fewer people watching your sports, if you have them paying more money and you have them more heavily invested in what they are watching, it all evens out. Yes, you'd like there to be more casual fans watching your sporting events, but it's almost like gambling. If you know anything about these gambling websites, whether or not it's sports betting, whether or not it's casino type games, the fact of the matter is probably 5 to 10% account for 80% of the revenue in any one of those apps, those online betting platforms. And I don't want to look up the statistics, but it's more heavily weighted than the 80-20 rule. It's almost 5-10% account for 80% of the revenue. And I believe that now that these sports leagues are married to these gambling sites, they see the success of that model. We don't need to have every single household in the US, in North America, in Europe, in Asia, watching every one of these sporting events if we can extract from the people that we know are going to watch more and more money. That will make our streaming partners that much more happy, and it makes us happy because we can then leverage these people's fandom, their absolute undying loyalty against them by then charging higher fees to networks and to streaming platforms and making even more money. It's likely we will see more players come into the broadcast market for sporting events, and it will further dilute the platforms that these sporting events appear on. And that brings me to my last story, Streameast. Streameast was a sports site that had every single sporting event that you could think of for free. Were these broadcasts legal? No, they weren't. And there were many people in the National Basketball Association, in the National Football League, Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, the Premier League. They were very pissed that this sports site became so popular. And what happened was it was almost like the pig that got too fat and thereby was slaughtered. LeBron James, I can remember this story, was sitting courtside and he was watching another NBA game on his phone via Streameast. Now, this is one of the richest people in sports. The man has enough money to go out and pay for every single one of the streaming channels, the league passes, whatever. He could pay every one of those fees, every one of those charges, and it would be probably a half a second of his salary for one day. And yet, he was streaming the basketball game via Streameast for free. The streams were often very good. You were getting a feed from one of the network partners, so you weren't getting some international fee where they weren't speaking English and you couldn't understand what was going on. No, you were getting a national feed from one of the sports league partners, and it was for free. And of course, that then elicited all of the attention necessary for the FBI to get involved, for all of these different trade industries to get involved. After a massive investigation, Streameast was recently shut down because they were able to find out where all of these servers were, and I believe they were in international locations. I believe one of the primary locations was Egypt. Some guy that represents the trade industry was interviewed after this news came out, and he said, with this landmark action, we have put more points on the board for sports leagues, entertainment companies, and fans worldwide, and our global alliance will stay on the field as long as it takes to identify and target the biggest piracy rings across the globe. First of all, the PR firm that helped this guy deliver this message should be immediately fired. Absolute and total 21st century douchebags. To use all of these sports analogies, the nomenclature in response to this news, whether or not it was a press release or this guy went on record via a phone call or whether this was a TV interview, just absolute and total douchebaggery. But more than that, shut the fuck up that this action in any way, shape, or form puts, and I use quotes here, points on the board for fans worldwide, that this is somehow a win for fans. Given that I'm a known quantity, this is my podcast, you hear me speaking on it, I would never and have never used StreamEast to stream a sporting event. How dastardly. But in the event that anyone on planet Earth decided to use StreamEast, including one LeBron James, I say more power to you, because fuck these leagues. These guys who own these teams and run these leagues do not give a shit about you, the fan. And how can I boldly state as much? Because they don't give a shit about their own business partners, and they don't even really give a shit about the welfare of the league. It's all about money. It's all about doing what they can to advance their own limited specific goals within the league. Yes, it's nice when the overall league makes more money, but wouldn't it be more nice if their franchise could make more money and circumvent the rules so that they have a competitive advantage? If that's the way they think about their own partners in these leagues, do you honestly think they give a shit about you? Do you think there's any consideration about how these broadcasts are now distributed and how they're actually published? All of these advertisements, all of this shit that we have to swallow before and after the game, it's all about the money. And here you have these same hypocrites turning around to you after having squashed a pirated stream so that you could get these games for free and talking about integrity and how this is for the betterment of the fan. I know that I'm part of the problem because I continue to watch all of these sports leagues. I continue to watch all of these games. I still care. But if Dan Snyder wants to keep two separate sets of books so that he can cheat his partners, that doesn't really bother me. If Steve Ballmer wants to do the same, pay Kawhi Leonard under the table with a scam environmental bank that's nothing more than a pass-through so he can give him additional compensation and not have to claim it on the salary cap, okay. But if you turn around then and tell me that as a fan, I'm a partner vis-a-vis these broadcasts and that it's in my best interests that you shut down a pirated stream so that I don't have to pay these exorbitant fees on 3 or 4 different platforms just so that I can watch 4 or 5 games a week? Don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.